Okay, there we go. On behalf of Democrats Abroad Global Black Caucus, I welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our guests, to our Democrats Abroad members, and to all of you who have joined this call from all around the world. My name is Liran Ojaz Moore, your Democrats Abroad Global Black Caucus Chair, DPCA voting rep for Democrats Abroad Switzerland, and International Secretary, and a Texas voter. And yes, I have received my ballot for the elections, which are just 44 days from yesterday on, or from now on. And yesterday was ballot day. So happy ballot day to everybody as well. I hope you received your ballots. So please let us know in the chat if and for which state you have received your ballot. If you have not registered yet, I urge you to do this immediately after this session. Visit votefromabroad.org to have your ballot sent per email. Our democracy is definitely counting on you. But before we kick off today's event, allow me to lay down some information and a few basic Zoom room etiquette rules. We are recording this session. If you do not agree with being filmed, please turn your camera off. Please keep your microphones muted when you're not speaking. And during the Q&A session, please type * hands up into the chat box so we can cue people speaking. We ask you to please not interrupt people mid-sentence while they are speaking. Democrats Abroad is a volunteer-driven organization. Please help us register Americans worldwide for the 2022 midterm elections, which are only in 44 days. The easiest way to contribute is to visit democratsabroad.org/BC-donations. Please consider stepping up as a volunteer. The best way to help us now is to become a phone banker. Visit democratsabroad.org/phonebanking_training. Another way to find resources in getting out the vote that you and your family members, your friends, your loved ones can do is by visiting the Global Black Caucus Get Out the Vote Toolkit, and the link will be provided in the chat as well. We absolutely must win these federal, state, and local elections. We need you. Our brothers and sisters need you. Our country needs you. Be the future. To become a volunteer, please follow the link, which is now being provided in the chat box as well. And last but not least, I encourage you to share the knowledge of this session with your family, friends, coworkers, or even a stranger in the park bank. 34 U.S. Senate seats, all 435 U.S. representative seats, 46 state legislators, and 36 state governorships are up for grabs in this November. Offices where the decisions that impact your and your family's day-to-day lives are made. Offices where decisions on climate justice, reproductive rights, affordable education and healthcare, and so much more are made. Let's put this in stark terms. In Georgia, Dems from abroad for Georgia were critical in Biden's win in the state and then in electing Ossoff and Warnock. Without Dems abroad, we likely have a Republican Senate. No ARP, no Inflation Reduction Act, no veterans efforts around burn pits, and no Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. We have a great panel together. We have Michael Blake, who was the vice chair of the DNC until 2021. And we also have another DNC member, Brensha Berry, who's also going to join us today. But before we have them speak, let's hear from our very own newest addition to the Global Black Caucus, Twana Hines. Before we actually start giving Twana the microphone, I do want to highlight that we're celebrating and recognizing small victories for the big win. And this has been our lead mantra since we've entered 2022. But to do so, we constantly have to connect the dots. Our newest Democrats Abroad GBC edition, Twana, as I just mentioned, has done an incredible job in connecting the dots on why the Roe v. Wade ruling can completely change the face of the United States and throw us back centuries. If you haven't grabbed a pen and paper and made notes, I would highly recommend to do it now. Twana, the floor is yours.
And oh, how I love the floor. My name is Twana Hines, as Jazz just said. I'm very excited and honored to be with you. No stranger to living abroad. This is my third time living outside of the United States. I'm currently in Portugal. I am new to the Global Black Caucus and to Democrats Abroad. So I'm super excited about getting my ballot and voting from abroad for the first time ever. So looking forward to that. So a lot of what Jazz said just now about connecting the dots and everything being on the ballot and this coming election, I'll focus that specifically from my perspective on reproductive health and sexual freedom. That's my area of expertise. I've been writing, teaching, speaking, and running a business specifically about reproductive freedom, reproductive justice, and rights since 2005. But on CNN, NPR, all of the good things, I'm findable. You can Google me. So I'll skip straight to the conversation. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start sharing my presentation. Okay, so here in Lisbon, some groups have been asking me to come and explain what is going on in the United States. And so when Roe versus Wade was overturned, for a couple of different groups, I came in, created a presentation and delivered it. This is an abbreviated version to show kind of how I've been explaining it to non-American audiences so that a lot of what may sound like hyperbole, or it may sound like, is it really that bad? Or should we really be caring about Roe? Because what if we don't like abortion, but we do stand for all the other democratic things? Isn't that okay? This presentation will tell you kind of how we need to think about that differently. Okay, so when we talk about connecting the dots, the first thing to think about is we as global, truly global Black caucus of Black Americans who are living throughout the world, we are part of the African diaspora. We've come from throughout the world, and we currently are living throughout it as well. This screenshot is actually a graphic of my DNA ancestry. I was doing genetic testing for health reasons. And so this actually shows I've traced a lot of my DNA. And so I can say where in Europe some of my family came from to bring other family members who came from Africa to the United States. So those dots are literally where my DNA is sprinkled for my family members. And when I say family, these aren't my family members. These are my great uncles and great aunts and all of these things, my great grandmother's siblings, basically. I come from a long line of people who care about reproductive justice. William Clarence McNeil Sr. actually headed up the gynecology department and was heading up the Department of Medicine at Howard University in the great should-be estate of Washington, D.C. So sometimes what people wonder is, what happened? So when we think of Roe versus Wade, that was back in 1973, right? Back then, 7 of the 9 justices, 7, so clear majority, voted for Roe versus Wade. So making sure that all people have the right to terminate a pregnancy should they need to, right? And so what happened between 1973, when an overwhelming majority of the court said, yes, that is what we want, compared to Dobbs, where earlier this year, the overwhelming majority of the court said, no, that's not what we want. Here's how I encourage people to think about it. This is about our view for what this country actually is. And if you want to see kind of how this exact same argument has been playing out for centuries, I encourage you to think about the Dred Scott versus Sanford decision, also a Supreme Court decision. And back then, what the argument was about was, are Black people actually Americans just because they're born here, right? So I just showed you my DNA picture where my relatives are from different parts of Europe and Africa, because as a Black American, that's many of our stories. That is the story of the transatlantic slavery tale, right, of what happened. So like back in 1857, the court was deciding, if you're a Black person born in America, are you actually American? And the court said, no, absolutely not. Look at the Constitution. It was never written with any idea that Black people were to be included as equal humans, humans at all, first of all, let alone equal humans to people who are not Black, specifically white people. And so they struck down and said, no, we're actually not going to give this person citizenship because that is not the kind of country that we are. Look at the roots of our founding documents, look at the roots of the kind of country that the United States is, and that is what the Dred Scott decision said. So then a few years later, it took the 14th Amendment. We actually had to amend the Constitution to say, you know, when we say a more perfect union, we're expecting they didn't get everything right. Everything in the world changes, including our Constitution. So in 1868, they amended the Constitution with the 14th Amendment and said, among other things, if you were born here, you are a citizen of this country. And so that argument about Are we the country that's becoming a more perfect union and we've had things wrong at sometimes? Or are we the kind of country where those things that we believed were actually right? We were never supposed to be acknowledging every rights for everyone. That's the argument as it played out in Roe. And when I say that, what I specifically mean is if you truly want to understand Supreme Court decisions, it's extremely helpful to look at the dissenters. So not just what was decided, but the people who were against what was decided, what did they say? So when you dig into the annals of the United States history and look at the people who dissented in 1973 with Roe, this is what they said. Basically, we're not that kind of country. The right to have an abortion, giving women mostly these rights, that's not deeply rooted in who we are. We have to look at the original kind of way in which we were meant to be. And that is how they argued against Roe in 1973. Thankfully, they lost, right? And we did have Roe. So you fast forward to Dobbs, which is when Roe versus Wade was overturned. This is what the Supreme Court looked like at this point, right? So you had 6 Supreme Court justices, all who were placed there by Republicans, and then you had 3 who dissented. So now we flipped it upside down. The dissenters are saying we should have Roe, and you 6 overturned it. And you may be wondering, hey, Jazz said something about Ketanji, and there'd be no Ketanji who didn't have the election. Where is she in all of this? She wasn't on the court at this point, which is why I didn't mention her. And the 3 who dissented versus the 6 who voted for overturning Roe. So here's what it looks like. That argument, right? Like I said, the Dred Scott argument of this is not who we were meant to be. This is not deeply rooted in our history. That is the basis on which they overturned Roe. These 6 people compared to the 3 that dissented on the bottom. Same argument centuries later. And so the original dissent, remember how I said when they were the minority, the people who wanted to who were against Roe and said it's not rooted in who we are. Well, guess what? This year, the lone rationale for why they overturned Roe is they said that's not who we are. It's not deeply rooted. It's the exact same argument. They're arguing for a different kind of country. And so this time the dissenters said, okay, if that's what they're arguing, you must understand that the same thing could be said for most of the rights that the majority of the court claims they're not tampering with, just like they said they weren't going to tamper with Roe. Same argument. And so this is why the dissenters said no one should be confident that the majority is done. So when you hear people who are for abortion access and we say, this isn't about abortion, the court itself and the dissenters have told you this. This is not about abortion because Casey, Roe, these are all part of the exact same constitutional fabric. It's this idea that we're becoming a more perfect union and the kinds of rights that we've got, like, for example, the ability to use contraception is newer. And that's the kind of people that we want to be, that we fight for these rights, we have these rights. Ditto for same-sex intimacy in marriage. All of these, the court told us when they dissented and said, do not overturn Roe. All of these are part of the exact same constitutional fabric. I'm not one to throw out phrases and say it's the same constitutional fabric without backing that up because I'm Midwestern that way. I mean what I say what I mean. So when I say that, this is specifically what I mean. So the Supreme Court, when they dissented and said same fabric, I read the entire dissent and pulled out each of the cases that they name checked. And so from left to right, when the court said same constitutional fabric with abortion, this is what it looks like. So back in 1923, we had to go to the court to say, you know what? We can teach children in different languages if we want to. That's what Meyer versus Nebraska gave us. The Society of Sisters in 25 said that people can attend different kinds of schools, right? We can have public schools, we can have private schools, we can have different kinds of schools, and that's okay. 1942, we had to get the right to make sure that we weren't sterilizing people without their consent, because that's deeply rooted in the history of the United States. we used to do that. We would sterilize people without their consent. Not that it never happens now, but we had a Supreme Court decide that is not the kind of country we want to be. 66, the government can't stop married people from getting contraception. 67, Loving versus Virginia. This is the decision that said if you are one race, ethnicity, and you are having sex with, kissing, in love with, in bed with, married to, wanting to be together with some of a different ethnicity, police can't come into your house, drag you out of bed, throw you in jail, and charge you with the crime of charge you with the crime of violating anti-miscegenation laws. That was just 1967. Some of you who are watching this video later on YouTube, and some of you on the call now were alive then. That's how recent this is. Eisenstadt, 1972, said, you know what? If married people can get contraception, guess what? Single people should be able to get it too. Okay, 77, different family members can live together. You don't have to be mother, father, and child. Grandmother can live with you. Nieces can live with their aunts and uncles. Different kinds of family members can live together. 77, Carey versus Population Services International. I actually interviewed the founder of that organization at a different reproductive health conference. This was saying that you can actually sell condoms and other contraceptions without a prescription, and you can't be hauled into jail for making advertisements for the fact that you do that. Okay. 87 said, even if you're in prison, you can still get married. Just because you've got a record, you've been in prison or something like that, you still have the right to get married. 2003 said we can't criminalize sexual acts such as anal sex, also called sodomy. And then in 2015, this of course was marriage equality. And so when the court says these are all part of the same constitutional fabric as Roe versus Wade that you see there in 73 that they got rid of. So when we tell you we're going back centuries, these are the kinds of rights that are literally at stake with this upcoming election. And so the court, like I said, explicitly tells us this. They say additional constitutional rights are under threat because either what the majority said is hypocrisy, like it's just Roe and Roe doesn't stand alone, so they're being hypocrites and this can't be right, that's not true, or they are coming after each of those other rights. So that's some of the things that I help explain to people who may not be familiar with like abortion access, reproductive justice, and what all of these things mean, right? And I always say, even as someone who very much believes in anyone's right to choose, right? I always say, you can believe what you wish. When we're talking about rights and the kinds of country that we want to be, we're saying we don't want others trampling on and stripping away rights like that constitutional threat that I showed you. All of those are up for grabs at this election that's coming up. We don't want anyone to be able to pull rights away from other people. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And if you have questions, at the end, there'll be a Q&A as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tawana, very, very much for this very detailed, very accessible, and also very easy to understand portion to help us realize how connected all of these court rulings actually are. So props to you. And I think I'm probably not the only person on the call today that's very astounded by all the work that you put in there. So thank you very, very much. And yes, we will have a Q&A section as well later on. So I think there might be one or two further questions coming towards you as well. Again, at this point, welcome to today's webinar on Zoom on the topic of who we are and how we vote, connect the dots. And as I said, Tawana already dived us right into connecting the dots. With the midterm elections on our doorsteps, it is crucial that we A, get people to register, and B, get them to vote up and down the ballot, and C, at best, of course, Democrats. Our conversations with a very, very diverse group of Black, Indigenous, people of color voters revealed that a significant number of Black voters living abroad feel concerned and let down because the Biden-Harris administration's ambitious equity agenda has been watered down. And in some cases thwarted by a deeply divided Congress driven by an obstructionist opposition. in particular, voting rights legislation. It is my greatest honor to introduce our guests of honor, Michael Blake and Brensha Berry. Hello and welcome, Michael and Brensha. How are you both doing?
Good. How are you all? Thank you so much for having us. This is really, really great. And thank you for your presentation before.
Thank you.
It's a blessing to be with you. I'm just angling it so I don't have a bad glare, Jazz. It'll give me about 30 seconds right there.
Okay, no worries at all. Well, as you were speaking already, that was Michael Blake as well. Michael Alexander Blake is a proud native of the Bronx, New York, and is the youngest son of Jamaican immigrants. His mother is a retired 40-year manufacturer and raised 4 boys, including a retired sergeant first class in the U.S. Army, and his father was a 1199 SEIU maintenance supervisor at St. Barnabas Hospital in the Bronx. Michael is the president of Next Level Sports and Entertainment, the only Black-owned national TV sports network in our country's history, which reminds me, I do have to do my workout. Viewed in 21 million US households and more than 100 million global households, and with programming ranging from HBCU now to the What's Next studio show. Blake is leading a team that is disrupting the sports, media, and technology industries. He served as a vice chair at large of the Democratic National Committee from 2017 to 2021, being the first Black man elected to DNC leadership since Ron Brown, helping lead efforts to mobilize millennial communities of color, local elected candidates, and training. Blake has traveled to 31 states and Japan since the DNC election in February 2017, ranging from candidate training to creating get-out-the-vote strategies in base communities across the country. Michael served in the Obama-Biden administration as the White House Associate Director of Public Engagement and Deputy Associate Director of the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, coordinating outreach to the African American minority and women business enterprises and state and county elected official communities. Next with us here today is Brensha Berry. Brensha Berry is a political strategist and public policy expert who is the DNC Coalitions and Community Engagement Director. Before joining the DNC, she ran the National Outreach Program as Vice President of Equity and Political Strategy for PL Plus, Paid Leave for United States. In 2020, Brensha served as National Deputy Director of Public Engagement, overseeing policy and coalition outreach for Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaign. Before joining Senator Warren's team, Brensha was the first Black woman to serve as Chief of Staff for a council member in San Antonio. She also worked in intergovernmental relations and state legislative affairs. Additionally, Brensha is a Hillary for American National Advance Team veteran and has experience working in state and local government in Louisiana and Texas. She's a proud graduate of Louisiana State University and received her master's in public affairs at the University of Texas in Austin. She's also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Berry is a proud Texas native, and her ultimate goal is to build power and equitable outcomes for marginalized communities. Again, welcome to both of you today. On this note, Brensha, I'm gonna have to come see you in October. I will be in Austin.
Well, I'm based in DC now, but if you're going to be there, I still have so much family and I'm always in Texas. So I'm happy to give suggestions on food and great things to do in Austin.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So the Voting Rights Act, signed into law in August 65, was meant to correct that President Lyndon Johnson, there we go, called a clear and simple wrong. The fact that millions of Americans were being denied the right to vote because of the color of our skin, but righting that simple wrong would prove to be far from straightforward. Over the past 5 decades, there have been systemic attempts to dismantle the law, many of those seeking to undermine its dismiss the Voting Rights Act as having done its job. So is this job really done, Michael?
Well, it's never done. And yeah, you know, I was just saying, there's a lot of Delta love in me. My chief of staff's a Delta. I got a lot of Deltas around me. I understand. I got my Alpha pin on. I mean, it wasn't even included in my bio there, but it's okay. I see how it's going to be today. Oh, okay. The not so subtle DST vibe that's happening. So let me lean in and show y'all my Alpha pin if that's what we're going to be doing out here. today. See, you can't put black folk on a call on a Sunday. That's how it's going to be out here. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be right now. It's great to be with you. As you can tell, I like to have fun when we have these conversations. I'm doing this from LA right now, as there was an incredible tech and entertainment session that happened on yesterday, as everyone was organized for. Okay, all right, ski fly going on. All right, clearly this is about to become a D9 meeting up in here right now. So to the question, Jazz, and thank you for inviting us and letting us be here as well. The work is never done, right? It's never done. There's no one piece of legislation that completes the assignment. There's no opportunity that allows for completion. And look, I'm a very direct, linear person when it comes to organizing, and put into context, I was the second Black staffer for Senator Obama at that time in Iowa. I ran Iowa constituency outreach for him, and then went to the White House thereafter. Democracy is a full-time sport, right? And we have to realize that you have a racist, sexist, homophobic ideology on the other side, that all that's going through their mind is, what do we need to do to make sure we defeat you, to take you back, right? And so, yeah, one bill, one executive order does not achieve that. That said, this week, several of us will be in DC for Congressional Black Caucus. Anyone, I know most are obviously around the world here, but if anyone will be in DC, we're hosting several events there. We can follow up on that. And in large part, it's to set the tone of what are we doing to keep pushing forward to that question, from what End Citizen United Let America Vote is doing and what their team and Tiffany Muller, which has been incredible, to what we have our conversation with Department of Justice with Paul Montero, and saying you have to have a community solution when it comes to democracy itself, to the dialogue that we're now having around mental health and democracy and legislation, which may seem like it's disparate, but when you have people that are afraid to exercise going out to particular communities, because on the other side, you have places like in Texas where and I lived in Austin, so I'm not saying it's just for Austin, everywhere else but Austin itself. If you got folks who are afraid of going to a poll because there may be someone with a long form gun there, that has impact when it comes to legislation in that manner as well. So to the question, it's never done. Which is exactly why we do these kinds of conversations today.
Absolutely. And while we were having these conversations, especially also with younger folks, the question arose quite often in, why do our Black votes matter? Brencho, what would you answer a young eligible Black voter on that?
Absolutely. Well, First, I would start with the power of the Black vote, and just building off of what Michael was talking about in terms of all of the work that has been done despite Republican obstruction. And I know we always say that this is the most important election of our lifetime, but it truly is an election where we have to continue to make clear, even from Tawana's presentation, that our rights are on the ballot. And just within the past 3 months, exactly 3 months ago, so many Black women and just the Black, we became less free when the courts decided to take away our right to autonomy over our bodies. And Justice Thomas has been very clear that it's not going to end there. When it comes to the youth vote, we know that the LGBTQ community is key, and there's so many young folks that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. There's so many young folks that identify at the intersections of identities from marginalized communities, especially Black folks, that will continue to be under attack if Republicans gain more seats. And the president and the vice president, the administration, Democrats have gotten a lot done despite the stalemate in Congress when it comes to, even for the DNC, Vice President Harris and Chair Harrison announced last July a $25 million investment in voter protection efforts, and that has already materialized into 13 voter protection directors across all the 57 states and territories. And I know also there's a Dems Abroad voter protection director, and we're really excited about that. But in terms of why they should vote, I think the answer is simple, that our rights are on the ballot, and also making clear that in an environment where there are people who are running for office that are saying that they would literally not certify free and fair elections, we have to show up and make sure that our voices are counted and that we're electing people that will stand up for our voices and our values. And those people are Democrats.
Absolutely, Wrench. I mean, you're saying that our rights are literally on the ballot there. And that also was really perfectly shown through the presentation that Tawana gave us at the beginning. So education and voting are fundamental rights of us, and there are also essential opportunities. But looking at key topics, starting with critical race theory, racism, climate change, criminal justice, health equity, immigration, reparation, voting rights, and so many, many, many more. I mean, this list could be like endless. Where do we start to connect the dots, Michael?
With the economy. And I think we have to make it very simple for folks, right? Like at the end of the day, there are 226 counties that voted for Barack Obama twice that then voted for Donald Trump, right? So you can't just have a blanket comment and say, well, these people are racist. That's wrong, right? It's not just that. You got some racist folk who clearly did that, yes, but they didn't feel heard or connected by what was being said at that point. And why did we have that swing back in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania is because overwhelmingly people made a decision that not only can Joe Biden restore democracy, but they feel like he can actually give us a path in what we're doing around the economy and creating equity. And so to that point, we have to have a clear through line, right? We have to be very clear of here are the successes we've had and not be hesitant in communicating that. And then on the other side, you got to say that these fools are clowns. Like you got to be very clear about that, right? And this is what they will do if they are in charge, right? David Axelrod will always tell us elections are about choice and contrast, right? You have to make it very clear there is a difference between me and this person, and that you as a voter have a choice. And so in this scenario, you have a party, a Republican Party, a fascist party, which is pretty much what it is becoming. Again, we got to call it what it is. That is on the zone of, we don't care about you having anything as long as we have power. Full stop, right? We care less about anything you're talking about. That's all we want to do. And so in that zone, though, the reason why I go back to the economy is when we have folks who are like, well, man, it can't be possible that would be sufficient enough to make people vote in that direction. We saw that happen in 2016. We literally saw that in 2016. We saw people make a conscious decision that I am willing to ignore the isms to make sure I can pay my bills. And so that intentional clarity is the through line to these other elements, because at the end of the day, you want to talk about what's going on in terms of the continual sexist policies that exist in the country, overwhelmingly the pay gap that exists, and especially when we talk about women of color, it's even greater in that dynamic. You want to talk about criminal justice. It is clear too many times these young brothers and young sisters, if you actually gave them opportunity to have a book in their book bag rather than arresting them for a dime bag, things would be different. When Tawana was talking about what was going on with choice, you cannot ignore the dynamics of the economic conditions that occur, especially when it comes to choice. And so at the end of the day, we got to make it real plain for people, because what are we looking at in tying this together? And obviously, Sister Barrett can talk about this more from a DNC perspective, currently being there, right? Like when you have a situation like in a Georgia, where you effectively have a tied race with the sitting US Senator who is the pastor of Dr. King's church, with the absolute clown, right? You can't then go into a conversation like, well, we just hope we just gonna mobilize more Democrats. That's not gonna be enough. You have to give a contrast of here is what's going to happen if this person wins. And I fundamentally believe throughout time, whether it be in the 55 through 64, which saw Brown versus Board through housing, whether it be through in the 1920s with the Renaissance. Every time we wanted to make a significant shift in this country when it came to protecting the right to vote and democracy and advancing policies, it was tied to making an economic argument. And that's what I think has to be the strategy, intentionality, what we do for this fall. Lastly, we have to then communicate the consequence of inaction. Right? And so too often the dialogue is only around presidential elections. No, you have to see that you have people right now that are very clearly telling you, this is what I will take away from you if we win. And when you create that space, and I think, again, Tawana, to the slide presentation that was there, I really appreciated the dichotomy of the 6 and 3. There is a very clear premise that you have to be thinking about. If you lose the Senate and you're in a scenario of more Supreme Court justices, it's not just theoretical any longer. Uncle Tom Clarence has already communicated to you what he would want to do and what the rest of them would want to do. Right. And so you have to have that premise point and make it very clear the consequence while tied to the economy.
Absolutely, Michael. And Brensha, how do we convey that messaging with our communities, with other grassroots organizations? And before you answer to that, I would like to please remind that if you have questions, you could already pop them into the chat by typing * hands up and filling it in there so we could cue everybody. And there was a great comment as well from Adrian. As Coretta Scott King said, freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. We have to do this work together. Absolutely. Brenda, so how do we convey that messaging to people that might not be that interested or knowledgeable in what's actually going on with our political state policies? Yes, they do feel the injustices in day-to-day life, but some people just don't know how to make a real change. And the easiest way to that is exactly just to go out and vote. But some people just need that extra layer of accessibility, maybe.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, I am in Georgia right now, and I'm meeting with our coordinated director, senior advisor, immediately after this call. So I feel like the Georgia example is incredibly pressing and relevant. What I would say in terms of getting the message to grassroots folks, one, and our team is like, that's our entire job. So we have been working across all of the departments to try and well, first, you all are incredibly powerful in getting the message to everybody that you're connected to, and you all are already organizing and mobilizing. So I'm not claiming to have answers that you're not already working on. What I will say is, from the DNC perspective, we're doing things that we've never really done before. We ran a micro influencer campaign for a couple of weeks that was targeted. It was Black and Latino and LGBTQ micro influencers in key battleground states that we gave them a menu of issues, right? Because not every person is with their brand and how they want to communicate iwillvote.com. Some folks, it might not necessarily be on choice, but rather gun violence and gun reform or climate. And we just gave them a list, and it's a very long list of options of what Democrats and the Biden-Harris administration has accomplished since being in office, and issues, right, that we can continue to make that contrast, as Michael mentioned, of this is what they are trying to take away. Part of what we've really been highlighting is the fact that Republicans have at every opportunity chosen to fight and vote against our rights and lowering costs. And we have to continue to make the several connections, and Michael is right. Like when we look at the issues that across the board, across all of our communities, but especially in the Black and Latino and API community, the number one issue is the economy, and making those connections between what the Republicans have done or not done and tried to obstruct in terms of progress and saving our economy and lowering costs, and also the messengers, the micro influencers, the digital, space, as well as showing up at festivals and community events. We are, I think next week, our LGBTQ plus director will be working with drag queens in states who are going to be hosting drag shows from now until election day, and registering people to vote and educating people on early vote and when, vote by mail and when they can get out the vote. We're also partnering with Register Her, the only the only organization that focuses on registering women of color. They're doing grassroots events in states at community centers, meeting women of color where they are to get people registered and do voter education outreach. And even just now, when I was downstairs, I was talking with Family Values at work. They've come up with a care voter file. So I came from the paid leave space, and care is something that people feel strongly about. So just really making those connections.
Making those connections is always key there. And we do have some more. We actually have a couple of questions that are coming in, and I know that you both have a pretty busy schedule, so I could also push my own questions a bit further down. There was a question from Malika. Malika, would you like to state your question verbally?
Yeah. What seems to be a problem for me is really reaching the Black community. If you look at or hear any of these hip hop radio shows, they start talking about how Trump got this rap person out, and there's no connection to the Democratic Party, like we're not doing anything. You've mentioned all these things, but there's another connection. There seems to be this mindset, this resentment, well, a Black vote doesn't belong to the Democratic Party, which it seems almost impossible to get beyond. So when you name all of these activities, it still doesn't, the dots don't connect back to the Democratic Party somehow, whether they're journalists or not. It's very frustrating for me. I don't know if you have an answer, but I'm looking for the answer. Also what Michael said, if I may call you by your first name.
Absolutely, go for it.
They don't, you gotta, I don't believe in, if they go low, we go high. I think we go high, we're missing them. I think we have to go low and put the light on. This is low. That contrast is very important, and that's not happening. We're being, for me, a little bit wishy-washy and trying to show, to have a higher moral ground. So in a nutshell, I want to see how can we get these dots connected back to that is us. This is the Democratic Party doing many things. And this Biden bashing is just crazy. What's the way around?
So let's rock on that. So first, I think on the message point on the other side, all they were talked through was around criminal justice on the one bill, in which I and others would remind people that was Hakeem Jeffries' bill, and then Trump just kind of co-opted that. So we got to, again, communicate that in our language. But that said, there are many of us that are remobilizing our coalitions of entertainers, and DJ put that in the chat just now. They'll be ready to rock for the fall. Again, Sister Very. So on the Georgia specific, when you have that conversation happening today, you can let them actually on text with Meredith Lilly and their team with Senator Warnock about how we could be helpful. But broader than that is how do we really rock with these entertainers? I mean, that's one of the reasons why, D Nice, who's one of my best friends, he's doing the Amazon event this Saturday night for CBC, and a few of us are doing other things with the intention of how do we get these entertainers back involved. For that particular reason, and also messaging with them. And I think obviously there's a surrogate opportunity of how do we give them short and simple talking points that they can utilize, especially on that social media front. So you'll see it get going. I think the one challenge of democracy is that people have short memory, and I don't believe that a lot of folks who heard the talk of Trump and criminal justice support before will resonate with them when it goes into the fall because of what they've seen happen over the last few weeks and months recently.
Thank you very much. Miriam.
And I also just want to add on, like, in terms of criminal justice reform, something that I feel like has not, it didn't break through because of timing, is the George Floyd executive order that the president implemented. It was released the day before Uvalde, and it just, like, obviously Uvalde was the story for those next few weeks, because, as Michael mentioned, it is cyclical, and it is something that timing is always a challenge. So we're just trying to, like, continue to reiterate and reiterate.
Okay. Miriam.
I don't even know where to start. First of all, Jazz, thank you for including me on this call. It's been so illuminating and painful for me to listen to. Michael, what you said about democracy as a full-time job resonated with me, because what I'm hearing is what we're struggling for is what we shouldn't have to struggle for. It should be there. Jazz and I are members of Democrats Abroad in Switzerland, where it is there. And okay, it was a homogeneous country when it was turned into a democracy, and it has sustained those rights. We don't have to fight for them. We have to fight for democracy in the world, not for every single basic human right. And what resonated with me also, Michael, was when I was helping to organize welfare rights, welfare recipients in 1968 in New York, where I also come from. I thought to myself, being poor and Black in America is a full-time job, and it shouldn't have to be. It shouldn't have to be that way. And I respect each of you for doing what you're doing and for what we're struggling to do, but we shouldn't be having to fight for basic rights anymore. They should be there so that we can fight for humanity and decency in the world. And yeah, it's just a brief comment. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything, but I needed to say that. And
well, we appreciate you saying that. First of all, you had to be 1 year old when you're doing that organizing.
Yeah.
So we
well, it won't get you anywhere. I was there.
I'm just saying it works pretty well. That's the pastor in me right there. So look, I think at the end of the day, we have to meet the moment by what's happening, right? And if we're wondering, and it's to Malika's question as well, if we're wondering how do you get the community involved, people got to know that you're fighting for them, right? And like, if you're watching this racist foolishness happening with DeSantis and Abbott of sending people up to Martha's Vineyard, the places, and not calling that out for what that is, right? If we're not out here telling people like, yo, this is wrong, this is who they are, they did that. It makes it impossible to get mobilized. Y'all are having a ball in this chat right now. Okay.
Absolutely.
There's a lot going on in this chat. Okay.
Absolutely.
But I think like that's how we tie that together. I mean, I think we appreciate the comment that's there. And I know, Jazz, I know both of us have to jump momentarily, but I know you were about to tee us up here.
Well, exactly. I mean, I do know that. Thank you very much, Miriam, for that comment. That means very, very much for all of us here too. But I know that putting it all together also cannot be done without looking at reparations. And I know that Antar, who's next in the queue, probably has a comment or a question about that. So maybe you do have time for just this one last question, Brensha and Michael, and then that would be great. Antar?
Hi, thank you, Jazz, and thanks to the guests for sitting here and explaining to us important information. So, like Jazz said, very quickly, because I know people have to leave. My name is Antar Keefe. I'm the chair of Democrats Abroad's Reparations Task Force. I'm a New York voter. I was also born in the Bronx. I reside in Germany, in Leipzig, Germany. And I have a question. There's a couple of parts to this, so I'll be brief. In the last election alone, over 12% of Black men actually shifted and voted for Donald Trump, the highest degree of Black voter bleed from the Democratic Party since Richard Nixon. This is a process that many political analysts have seen increasing for the last decade or so. Now, we're at a crux here. According to a Congressional Black Caucus poll in 2020, over 86% of Black Americans voted for reparations to be the #1 congressional issue. However, H.R. 40, the House Reparations Study Bill, for over 32 years has never been brought to a full House vote. Last year, it actually made it out of the House Judiciary, the first time in over 32 years. But what the freak has been happening? Nothing. We have many Black leaders right now in the Democratic Party that talk a big game around elections, but do nothing. At this point, we've had plenty of Black progressive candidates advocate for reparations and actually run on a platform for reparations in Democratic primaries, only to be sunken by dark money. However, the demand for reparations is growing with new task forces all over the country, especially in California state alone. This is a demand that cannot be denied. Why are no Black Democrats championing this issue 24/7, 365? And why is it approaching the sunset of H.R. 40 with over 215 confirmed yes votes? We need answers, and the Democratic Party needs answers, because the Democratic Party needs the Black vote.
Thank you, Antar. Let him answer the question.
I'll shut up now. Thank you, Jazz.
So I think I could dive in here, and I appreciate the passion from Antar, and it's real, and it's received here itself. One, I would, as a co-sponsor of the bill in New York around reparations itself, I would lovingly disagree that Democrats have not done anything on that point. And I actually just hosted Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee on Martha's Vineyard for part of the conversation around H.R. 40. For anyone that's not aware, obviously she took that following the late Congressman John Conyers 40 to signify 40 acres and a mule that was never given to us in that manner. Why has it not moved? Primarily because you haven't enough champions on the Senate side willing to move it itself. I think a lot of times people have been reluctant to do that in that manner around the framing and language that's happening there. And so I do believe that there is a moment that exists right now to provide that greater clarion call around reparations very directly. However, we have to have more votes to do this itself. And so we got to get past being at 50-50. We got to be at a 52, so we have flexibility at a minimum on that side, as well as continue to strengthen what we have on the House side as well. And quite frankly, I added in Robin Ruth Simmons as a separate link in that chat, because what Robin Ruth Simmons did in Evanston, Illinois, the first city in the country to actually pass reparations as a local policy, is getting more local electeds to champion reparations policies, not just what's happening in Congress in that manner. And so to tie this all together, I'll make this my final comment and then rock from here. Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you, love you, grateful for you. Looking forward to my invitation to all of your countries to come kick it. You know, I'm not just trying to be on a Zoom. I mean, there's a purpose in Dems Abroad. I've done an event in Japan, and I think we did one in London, if I'm remembering correctly as well. So, you know, putting that there. Second, look, the numbers are improving from where they were some recent weeks ago. I'm not going to say that things are great. They're not great, but they're significantly better when they were. And I think at the end of the day, putting in that perspective. Lastly, if I may, I want to leave you with a quote before turning it back to Sister Barrett, and we rock from there, of something that has been, I would say, a motivation to me over the years itself. In large part, it comes from JFK and the framing of it as well. It simply just starts by saying, so long as there is one child without milk. Just want to let that sit there. So long as there is one child without milk, so long as there's working farmers without wages, so long as there are seniors without significant pensions, so long will there be the need for the Democratic Party, and so long will be the need for leadership. And that's why we're grateful for you. Put Mindful in the chat. We're happy to be following up with you in every possible way.
Well, we are utterly grateful, Michael, for your time and your effort and your knowledge and wisdom in this as well. Brensha, are you also heading out, or do you have a
I
couple?
am. I do
Okay.
have to hop.
Thank you as well very, very much for everything both of you are doing and helping us and also providing us with
Well,
your.
Sister Brent gets her final word too now. You know,
Absolutely.
Thank you. No, I mean, I just thank you all for your time. I definitely echo what Michael said. Please like invite me to every single country that you all are representing here. And I will also put my contact information in the chat. We're 44 days away. We really, really need you all's help to reach out to every single body, to get people to vote, to make the connections with our coalition and continue to build up and expand the coalition. We have a lot of good things to talk about. We just have to keep creating that echo chamber, and you all are like the first step in doing that. So thank you again for having me, and I look forward to working with you all in this sprint to the midterms and beyond, because we also have work in 24 and it doesn't stop there. So thank you all.
Absolutely. So thank you, Brensha. Thank you, Michael. Love and light to both of you, and talk to you soon. For everybody else on the call today, we're actually at the end of our program. I would like to use the opportunity to highlight Democrats Abroad Canada Black Caucus, who's having their second event today as well at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so in a few hours. And it is about voter suppression experiences, sharing stories. And I'm seeing Star from the Democrats Abroad Canada Black Caucus Steering Committee is on the call as well. Would you like to give us 2 words about what's happening at your event?
Yes, we're hoping that whoever can, they're welcome to join us our time, 7 p.m. And we're going to try to first have the stories and know what is happening and why and what types of oppression our Black voters and others are facing when they request overseas ballots, not receiving the ballots, and why, and whether this is isolated or not isolated. So we'll be collecting those. It will be recorded and you will be able to go on and it will be posted and you can listen to it at another time. And then we're hoping to have a follow-up in October and have a speaker tell us how do we help protect ourselves from that. So the next session will be on voter protection.
Absolutely. And the link to that event for today, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, is in the chat box as well. And for those of you who haven't met Starla yet, Starla rocks a different fabulous hat in every different Zoom call. So I wonder what she's going to wear later at that other event. So thank you, Starla, for everything you're doing in Canada as well. Regardless of where you vote in the US, be it in Texas or Maine or Arizona, I urge you to go to votefromabroad.org today and register to vote and request your ballot to be sent in by email today. Today. Let it sink in. Today. If you encounter any difficulties at all, please contact the help desk at Vote From Abroad. Type into the chat box onto the bottom right side of the website. I'd like to give a big shout out again and thank you to our panelists, Michael Blake and Brensha Berry, and also to the people behind the scene as well, to Beverly Lax from Kenya, who's done the technical support here, and also a big thank you to our GBC newest team member, Twana Hines, who's leading and spearheading a new part of the GBC that we're doing, and is health equity. So there's more coming from that way as well. I'd also like to express my gratitude to everybody who's joined us today. Please use the information that you've heard, read, seen, experienced here today and share it with your loved ones. All our Democrats Abroad teams would love to have your help. Please consider, again, stepping up as a volunteer. We only have 44 days left in this critical year, in this federal, state, and local elections. and we absolutely must win. And I really can't stress this enough, but I'm actually a little bit confident. I'm more confident than many months prior to today. I have to be honest there. I think we can rock this, but we can only rock this if we really encourage everybody to register and actually to go out there and vote. Our volunteer link is also being added in the chat box. If you have any further questions, ideas, want to participate in any other events, just feel free to email me at blackcaucus@democratsabroad.org. And please remember that this is an all-volunteer organization. Your donation goes a long, long way. Even a tiny donation means a lot to us. Please follow the link in the chat box and give what you can. But for now, there's nothing more to say than get informed, be inspired to execute your fundamental right to vote. Thank you, everybody, very, very much for joining in today. This recording will be available on the YouTube channel, so please also spread the message there. Love ya. Thank you.